Okay, so as mentioned, we're going to have a roundtable discussion. I'm going to relate first and foremost to these questions, and then if we have time, we'll open it up to any other questions that you may have. I'm going to start with this question. Can you please share with us how your recent trip to Israel was and your observations of where Israel and the people of Israel stand during these difficult times? So I was just in Israel for a few celebrations, 2 bar mitzvahs, and one conversion and a wedding. And we do want to congratulate, she's with us, Yun, whose full Hebrew name now is Yaira Ruth Rafaela, for culminating this long journey of conversion. It's just a milestone in the everlasting journey of growth in Judaism, but it was truly an honor being there. Maybe we should hear your answer to this question of how Israel was and your observation. But it's always special to be in Israel. It feels like home, as I'm sure many of you can attest to. I will share with you just a few anecdotes that I think answer this question in the best of ways. Anecdote one, I shared over my sermon during my sermon on Shabbat morning, but it really just moved me so profoundly. I was celebrating a bar mitzvah, and one of the things the bar mitzvah wanted to do is go and celebrate with the IDF. So we went south to the Gaza Strip, and after we visited some of the villages that were just ransacked on October 7th, we went to celebrate with soldiers in the Nir Am base. Nir Am is a kibbutz. In the kibbutz, there's a base called Nir Am base, and there are many soldiers there of all ages. And we celebrated with them, and it was just a beautiful celebration. But the peak of that celebration was when all of a sudden I noticed about 8 kids who were 13, 14 years old, who came and joined our celebration. And I said to them, welcome, where are you from? They said, we're from here, from the kibbutz of Nir Am. I said, come, join in, have some meat from the barbecue that you just made. I said, no, we didn't come to eat. So why did you come? They said, we just came to say Mazel Tov to the bar mitzvah boy. We came to rejoice, him and his family. Can you introduce us to him? So I said, sure, yes, the bar mitzvah boy, and they hugged, and it was so beautiful. And 5 minutes later, this woman comes and says, I'd like to meet the mother of the bar mitzvah. I said, who are you? I'm also from the kibbutz. And I came to apologize because my son fell asleep, and he also wanted to come and congratulate them and say Mazel Tov on his bar mitzvah. So I immediately introduced them. And then she did something just so beautiful. She goes to her purse and she takes out an envelope and she says to the mother of the bar mitzvah, here's a little present for your son who just became bar mitzvah. Now, remember, they never met before. They didn't even know of each other. All they knew, as people of kibbutz Nir Am, is that there's a bar mitzvah being celebrated at the army base of Nir Am. And as not just a nice gesture, but coming from this deep sense that we're one family, they came to celebrate with a distant member of their family. And it was just so beautiful because it did solidify this idea that, after all, we are a family. Rabbi Steinsaltz would often say that that's the only definition that we can give the Jewish people, because we're not a religion. If you're not religious, you're still Jewish. We're not a race because we have people of all races. We're not an ethnic group because you have Sephardic and Ashkenazic. And we're not a nationality because if you don't live in Israel, you're still Jewish. So what are we? We're a family. We come from the 12 tribes, all brothers and sisters. And we're descendants of that one family. And the converts are like adopted children that become a part of that family too. So we're one family. And that was felt so deeply, so beautifully when those kids came. And really, they didn't eat. And I've almost forced them to eat, and they just wouldn't. They only came to bring joy and to celebrate this bar mitzvah. It was just so beautiful. So that's one. Yes. No. Yeah, from America. That emphasizes this point, but that's a good point because they weren't even from the same country, let alone from the same culture. Or it was really, really beautiful. So that's one. Two, I also mentioned on Shabbat, but I was just so profoundly moved. And it almost made me feel so small because, you try and serve, you try and give. But next to this superhero, like you feel just so small. But we met a man named Mickey who lived, hopefully wants to come back to live in Nachal Oz. Nachal Oz is one of the kibbutzim that were most devastated by the terrorist attacks on October 7th. And in fact, he had come to learn that they targeted him specifically. Why? Because he's part of the elite force of the police. And they knew that if they get rid of him, it will be easier to conquer Nachal Oz. In fact, his home is at the very entrance of Nachal Oz. And the reason that is because it was a strategic move on behalf of the kibbutz. They told him, you go and live at the very front of the kibbutz, so that anyone who tries to infiltrate, you can kill, and we trust you because you're part of this elite force. So they knew of him, they knew exactly why he lived at the very front of the kibbutz, and therefore when the terrorists attacked Nachal Oz, they came through the front entrance and immediately zoomed in on his house. And at first he tells us that we met Mickey there. He took us to his house. Then the kibbutz is still ransacked. In fact, no family has returned to Nachal Oz yet. Hasn't been rebuilt yet. But anyway, we met him there. And then he tells us the story of how when he saw these terrorists come in, they came with a jeep. And he thought that they were Israeli soldiers because they were dressed like Israeli soldiers. So he waves at them. He says, hey, I'm here to help you. There were missiles being launched at them. Remember, 6:29 a.m., he woke up from the noise of these rockets. And he sees these soldiers. He says, oh, finally, they came to protect us. Hi, I'm here to help you. And lo and behold, the more they come close, the more he realizes that they're terrorists. So he runs to his home and he tells his wife and his daughter, run to the bomb shelter within the home, mamad, it's a room within the home, and go and hide and stay there. Make sure you don't leave. I'll take care of the chaos outside. And then he goes back outside and he sees that he's overpowered by these terrorists. There are 14 terrorists coming towards him and starting to shoot at him. So he goes back into his home and he says that I'll make sure that they don't enter the hallway that leads to the bomb shelter with my wife and daughter are. And they start entering his home. 2 terrorists start to enter his home and he shoots them immediately. And the terrorists say to themselves, I guess we can't go in through the front door because he's there fighting us back. So they try to go through the back window of the bedroom, the only bedroom besides the bomb shelter that exists in that home. They went through that window. They just started by destroying the blinds, and he shot through the window and killed 3 terrorists. Said, okay, this window is not a good point of entrance for us, the terrorists said. So they went through another window that leads to the bathroom. And that window is up high, it's more narrow. So one terrorist started to dive through the window and he shot him too. And the terrorist said, okay, we won't be able to overcome this guy with just our rifles and pistols. We're going to go in and throw grenades at him. And so terrorist who came through the front and threw a grenade immediately, and another terrorist threw a grenade through the window that they try to infiltrate through. And thankfully, the grenade that they threw through that window, which was much closer to where Mickey was, did not explode, just miraculously. The grenade that was thrown through the front entrance exploded, and immediately it shut down the electricity, so it was now pitch dark, full of smoke. From the blow of the grenade, the door of the room where Mickey was in fell on him, but unfazed. Mickey began to fight back, and he started to shoot through the smoke and through the darkness to the terrorists who were now coming into the home, and he eventually retrieved to the bomb shelter. And he locked the door, and he said to his wife and to his daughter, you stay as far away from the door as possible. I'll take care of the terrorists that come towards us. They came, they placed a bomb on the door of the shelter. Just imagine the scene. This is happening over a few hours, from 6:30 in the morning, now it's 11 a.m., he says. And they were able to explode the front entrance. of the bomb shelter, the door, and he's constantly shooting at them. He only had his pistol and 7 magazines. And at one point, one terrorist comes into the bomb shelter, and he's so close to him, he's able to overcome him physically with his own hands. He's able to make his gun drop, and he shoots him. And more terrorists come, and then he says to himself, I'm not going to be able to overpower them. So he tells his wife and his daughters whisperingly, I'm just going to surrender. Surrender. Obviously, he wasn't going to surrender, but to act as if he's surrendering. So he tells the chief terrorist that came into that home at that point, I'm surrendering. Don't you worry, I'm surrendering. By the way, I didn't mention, but at the very beginning, after he had shot a few and they realized that they weren't too successful, they tried to trick him into surrendering. How? By grabbing one of his neighbors, who later was taken to Gaza as a captive, and telling the neighbor, tell Mickey that no one is here, no terrorist is here, and that it's safe for him to come out of his home. And thankfully, he was clever enough to know that this was all a trickery. And he was proven right when he started hearing Arabic shortly thereafter. But anyway, so he knew that surrendering was an option based on that. So he just said to the chief terrorist, I'm surrendering. And the chief terrorist says, fine, great. I'm making you a coffee. I'll let you pack your bag, take your wife out and your children if you have any. And we'll give you a few minutes and we're waiting for you at the entrance. A few minutes go by, but he doesn't surrender. So now the chief terrorist understands that this guy is trying to trick them. So he tells Mickey, I'm coming out with my RPG. I'm going to launch it at you, but I'm going to count till 20. I'm going to give you 20 seconds. And Mickey sees the chief terrorist holding his RPG on his shoulder, right? Literally, like from here to the podium. And he's in the room and he sticks, he sees the RPG being launched, almost, being prepared to be launched. And he says to his wife and to his daughter, in 20 seconds, we'll either have a miracle and we'll win, or we'll die, but we're not surrendering. And guys counting, chief terrorist, 20, 19, 18, 17, about 10 seconds. Mickey, with all his might, comes out and he shoots at the chief terrorist. He's able to injure him quite significantly. When the other terrorists see that their chief is injured, they panic and they grab him out of the house, his body out of the house, and they mention something, let's get out of here. And they take all the Jews that were kidnapped, put them on jeeps, and he, from the bomb shelter, starts hearing all the jeeps leaving. And he thought to himself, okay, that's it, we won. There was a miracle. That was at about 1 p.m. And now he realizes, gosh, my wife is here, my youngest daughter is here, but my older daughter had a sleepover last night. And she's by the neighbor. I'm wondering what's happening, but he's too afraid to leave. So he stays, he's in the state of limbo. At 5 p.m., he hears more jeeps coming towards him, and he says to his wife, they came back to get us. And his wife says, no, it might just be the army. He says, no, it's terrorists. So they said, okay, let's wait and we'll see. Then his wife all of a sudden tells him, I heard that they said Kobe, Jewish name. So it must be Tzahal, it must be the IDF who came. So his wife runs out and he says, don't leave, it might just be a terrorist. She runs out and thankfully she was right. It was the IDF who had come at 5 p.m. finally to rescue them. But the IDF then say to his wife, go back into the home because there's still terrorists roaming here. So she goes back into the home. When Mickey hears that there's still terrorists roaming, he says, now I have to go out and help the IDF. And my daughter is still by her neighbor. So he goes out and the IDF says to him, you don't want to go out. You're going to be overpowered. He says, I don't care. I have to go to my friend, my neighbor, because my daughter is there and I don't know what's happening with her. So he defies their order and he starts walking to the center of the village, of the kibbutz, to save his daughter. The IDF sees that they can't persuade him to go back into his home. So they say, okay, we'll send 4 soldiers to go with you. They sent 4 soldiers to go with him, and they come to his friend's home, his friend where his daughter is having a sleepover, and they realize that the home is surrounded by terrorists. So they immediately ambush them and they kill all of them. They walk into the home, and they is reunited with his daughter, and he realizes that she had been with about 8 children, all from the ages of 6 to 10, from 6 to 10, dehydrated, in panic mode. You can just imagine. And they immediately attend to them. They bring them to a safe shelter. They continue to fight in the kibbutz to get rid of all the terrorists. Mickey said that on that day he killed 23 terrorists. And eventually at 1 a.m., a bus came to evacuate all of the survivors. And they took them to this army base where there was delicious dinner prepared for them. But he said that the most grueling scene, in spite of all that he saw, was being on that bus, leaving the kibbutz, and these kids now realizing that they're missing a father, missing a brother, missing a sister, missing a mother. And one of them starts to shout, Efo ima, where's my mother? Another one says, Efo actually, where's my brother? And it was just, you can imagine, just devastating. But then one of the most comforting scenes was shortly thereafter, when the adults in the bus came to those kids and said to them, Ima lo tachzor, your mother's not coming back, but I'll be your mother from now on. Father's not coming back, but I'll be your father coming back from now on. And in many ways, again, that it solidified not just the responsibility that we have towards one another, but this idea that we are one family. We may lose our biological family, but we can never lose our spiritual family. And that was emphasized very strongly on that bus. Anyway, so that was another very profoundly inspiring and moving moment. And then I'll just mention one last also elevating moment. Even though the whole experience in Israel is one big elevating moment, but I also had the privilege of being in Hebron. Hebron is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah are buried, our forefathers and mothers. And then the group I was with, the Bar Mitzvah group I was with, said, you know what, let's go and visit the people who live, the Jews who live in Hebron. And for that, you have to leave the cave of Machpelah, the burial site, and you have to go up the mountain, and you have to go through more checkpoints because it's a pretty dangerous area. And at the very last checkpoint, a soldier comes out and says, where are you guys from? And we said, from Arizona. He says, oh, Arizona? I was supposed to go there this year, but because of my army service, because of the war, I wasn't able to. I said, really, where were you supposed to go to? He says I don't know if you heard, but a congregation called Congregation Bet Tefillah. I said, no, I never heard of it before. And that happened to be that he was supposed to be one of our shlichim, right? We had Moshe and Ishai last year. We have these Israeli ambassadors each and every year. He was supposed to be one of them, and he comes from the Steinsaltz Yeshiva, where I studied. And it was just a beautiful moment, reminding us that magic happens in Israel. But not just in Israel. Magic happens when you're willing to come out of your comfort zone, because we were coming out of a comfort zone to go into this dangerous area. But really just to show solidarity with those Jews that are really risking their lives every day to be able to, stand and with pride and live in those dangerous areas. So we were coming out of comfort zone, and I think that's the lesson it taught me, that when you are willing to come out of your comfort zone for the sake of your fellow Jew, then God comes out of his comfort zone too, and he shows you some wonders. And it's just a beautiful moment. Anyway, so that's my experiences. Do you want to share some of yours? Then we can continue here.
And from the beginning, like I
Mm-hmm. Wow. Ah. Yeah. That's where you're from, just to tell people that don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Mm. That's so nice. Mm. Mm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's magical. That's right. Yeah. 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 Mm. Hmm. Very good. Right. Beautiful. Yeah. And then what? That's right. That's the question. Very good. Excellent. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's true. It is a magical place where everything happens just so seamlessly. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get to these other questions here. Next question. So many of us struggle with prayer or feeling connected during services. What advice do you have for deepening our connection to prayer and feeling more present during our spiritual practices? Okay, so I recognize I also feel sometimes disconnected during prayer service, first and foremost because of the length of prayer service. In our ADD age, kind of, we lose focus quite quickly. And to stay here, especially on Shabbat mornings, which is a longer service, for 3 hours, sometimes 3.5 hours, and be fully focused is almost impossible. I'll say that openly. But I will say that there are some methods to stay focused and also to make your prayer experience a deeply spiritual one. Method number one, I think I've said this in the past, but method number one is that God also recognizes that you can't focus on every single prayer or every single word. But what you can do is maybe even ahead of time, pick one prayer or two or three, however much you can, and make those prayers your bridge to heaven on that day. May it be the Ashrei or the Shema or the Amida or the Baruch Shamar. But at least ahead of time, you know, okay, I won't be able to be fully focused on all the other prayers, but I'm going to give my all to those 2-3 prayers. And in many ways, that's all that you need. Prayer means connection. Tefillah in Hebrew is the word for prayer, but it means connection because God wants you to connect. So if you connect during those 2 or 3 prayers, you've achieved the goal. So that's method number one. Method number two is the Hasidic method. And that is that you don't come into prayer straight from your day-to-day life, but you come into prayer after long meditation of either contemplating God's greatness, whether it may be through a hike sometimes where you see this beautiful creation of God, these beautiful mountains and birds and plants we have here in Arizona. Or it could just be where you sit down with a text that speaks about God's greatness. That's why I said it's a Hasidic method, because many Hasidim sit down with texts that speak about the greatness of God. And then they come into prayer on that level of connection already. So that's another method. Sometimes you don't have the time, especially, during our day-to-day. So it's hard, but it certainly helps the focus, the connection, the meditation that needs to happen during prayer. That's method two. And method number three, I would say, is a method that's much more connected to song. I think I would quote here Rabbi Steinsaltz, who would say very often that he sometimes wishes that synagogues could be like the black churches in the South. I don't know if you've ever been to a black church. Just because Rabbi Steinsaltz said that, and I had the privilege of living in the South in Atlanta for 4 years, I actually did go on a Sunday to a black church, and it's true. I mean, the atmosphere, the life, the joy, the passion is contagious. And I think that in many ways, if you don't feel that you connected to prayer, then sing that prayer or wait for a song to be sung and just immerse yourself in it. Because if the words don't do the trick, the song will. And I think the more we incorporate song in prayer, the better it is, the more it helps that connection. So these are 3 separate methods that can really help deepen our connection with God during services. Now, I just because this question includes this, I would also, of course, encourage these methods to be applied, but let's also not forget that we should eliminate any other distractions. For example, this. So I see a lot of men, and sometimes including myself, come with our phones during our prayers here 3 times a day. And even during the prayer, they look at it. So obviously, you can pick one of those methods, but if you are distracted by this, it's not going to help. So I have to say that all these 3 methods, or whichever method you pick, should be applied first and foremost but you first and foremost have to eliminate any distractions that could be applied in the best of ways. Okay, let's go to the next question. I'm going through a rough patch in life. What texts can you provide to bring me comfort or guidance during these difficult times? Texts. There are texts and there are practices. I think it's a very general question. I think everyone has a different text that speaks to him or her. But I will say that most importantly, when we go through difficult times, it's not so much the text that will bring us comfort, even though, again, as I said, depending on who you are, there are texts that will bring you comfort, but I think those are just band-aids. I think what brings us the most comfort is our complete dedication to filling that void. If it's the passing of a loved one, and now the loved one is not physically with us anymore, then your dedication to filling that void through action will bring you the most comfort. That person stood for kindness, then you be more kind. If that person stood for wisdom, then you share more wisdom with others. That whatever that person stood for, you take upon yourself to fill that void now with the attribute that he or she stood for. That will not only help fill the vacuum, but it will also give you the comfort because it will, in many ways, remind you that that person is still with you and through your actions. So that's in case of someone's passing. In case of a challenge that I may have, it could be a challenge that I'm feeling down because something happened to me. So you have to sit with yourself and you have to ask yourself, okay, how can I fill that void? I'm feeling down because, let's say, someone insulted me. So I'm going to respond to that insult with being even more kind, with being even more empathetic towards my surroundings. In many ways, you use your challenge as a springboard for growth and for filling that void. I think that's the way Judaism is always, either collectively or individually, is always related to challenges. We've never shied away from them, and we've always responded to them with even more vigor and passion towards that which the challenge is trying to destroy. So that would be, I think, the best way to deal with our difficulties. And then one last question here, and then we'll open this up. How can we maintain a healthy balance between our spiritual commitments and the demands of everyday life, especially as parents and community members? So I would say being parents and being community members is also a spiritual act. There's no separation here. If you have a spiritual commitment to God, then God doesn't just belong in the synagogue. God belongs also when you are in your home. God lives and breathes when you are interacting with your children and doing homework with them. So that in and of itself is a spiritual experience too. It doesn't have to be compartmentalized here. And maybe that's the way to deal with it, to see every experience that we have as parents, as community members, since these are the examples brought here, as spiritual experiences. And then maybe you won't feel like you're losing out. That's number one. But number two, I would also encourage, I understand what the question is too, so I don't mean to be a smart aleck here, but to be more practical, I would say that I think it's key to carve moments during the day that I call gas station moments that can give you the spiritual enrichment to go and face life with all of its difficulties and technicalities. So for me, for example, that moment is in the morning when I pray with my tefillin. That to me is a gas station, and then I can face the day with all of my might because my tank is full. Without that, I think it's very hard to face the day altogether and not allow it to overcome you. Now, for some people, it's prayer. For some people, it's learning. For some people, it's meditating. Some people, it's doing a mitzvah. Visiting the sick. For some people, that's their gas station, which is a beautiful thing. I think you have to pick your gas station. But everyone needs to carve a moment like that every single day. I think without that, you just become depleted very quickly. So that's to relate to the technical aspect of the question. But again, we also should see every experience, especially as parents and community members, as spiritual experiences, and then we'll realize that God is indeed everywhere.